A very good afternoon, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Faiza and I have the pleasure of being your MC today. Welcome to the second ISAS lecture titled The Indian Civil Service as It Delivered, which will be presented by Mr. Vinod Rai, Distinguished Visiting Research Fellow, Institute of South Asian Studies, NUS, and the 11th Comptroller and Auditor-General of India. To start the proceedings, it is my pleasure to invite Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman, Institute of South Asian Studies, NUS, and Ambassador at Large, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Singapore, to deliver the opening remarks. Ambassador, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Happy New Year. I hope you are looking forward to a good year and a good talk today. I'm very happy to welcome you to this very important topic that's being discussed. A very good speaker. We had a very private session with him on something else that he's part of the civil service that he was involved in, and that is the 2G scam and his famous report, which has now come into, once again, a lot of discussion and what else that happens in India. This is the second of the series of ISAS lectures. The first one was delivered by Mr. Shivashankar Menon, and that was just about a month or so ago. Today's topic, the Indian Civil Service, has it delivered? If we were to do a referendum in India today, the answer, I think, and I think I'm not wrong, will be heavily on the negative side, that it has not. But perhaps the discussion would be more on to what degree has it not delivered, or to what degree has it delivered. Bureaucrats and bureaucracies are essential to the functioning of government. Some call the civil service the frame, the steel frame of the government. However, it has been described as one of the shackles that can constrain an economy and society and inhibiting changes and innovation. However, the running of a government has become much more complicated, and no one would say that you can carry on without the civil service. The two factors largely contributing to this sort of ambivalence maybe on civil service, in India particularly, is the amendments of the Constitution, which have bestowed greater powers to the local bodies and the right to information, which seeks a far more responsive and transparent administration. As the bureaucracies do not function in a vacuum, they are subject to political interferences, regional pressures, and several other factors. As a result, the objectivity of their functioning has come up for adverse scrutiny most of the time. The factor, coupled with the deep-seated suspicion that career advancement does not take place only on a consideration of merit, have created serious motivational issues, as India's civil services show. The services are often perceived as being as lacking in competence and professionalism, having political bias, suffering declining independence, and of course concerns around malfeasance and probity. To speak on the functioning of the Indian civil service and the reforms needed to make it more efficient, transparent, and professional, we have today someone that Forbes magazine described as a rare breed of civil servant who knows how to get work out of the government, and that is Mr. Rai. I think he's well known in India, and he's well known, I think, among Indians in Singapore, of the work that he has done as the CAG. And that is something that I'm sure will come up during the discussion. We hope you would have a robust discussion with him. He's a very forthright person, and he answers questions without too much of shadow play. He comes direct with the answers. So that's his great merit. I hope you will have a good discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Mr. Vinod Rai.
It is now my honor to invite our guest speaker, Mr. Vinod Rai, to deliver his lecture.
No, you're not getting ready for a fight.
I want my sleeves now. I want to wear my sleeves. Ambassador Pillai, High Commissioner Javed of India, distinguished friends and colleagues. I really consider it a privilege to be standing among such distinguished people, to have the opportunity to address each one of you today. And I said this in the morning today when we were in a closed door discussion, that I represent two of the most despised communities universally, the bureaucrat and the auditor. I combine both, so it's not very often that people like to listen to an auditor, least of all see him in a lovely evening and be subjected as a captive audience to listen to him. But Ambassador Patel made the request that I speak, and I really value my presence in the Institute of South Asian Studies, where we have had the opportunity, I've had the opportunity of meeting with so many people from such diverse specializations areas. That's such an enriching experience. Now, the subject chosen for today is a subject which in fact is currently engaging the attention of just about everybody in the globe today. And this is largely because of two factors that have taken place. One is the onset of globalization, where everybody is pitted with everybody else. It's a challenge, it's a competition, and every country is plugged into every other country. And hence the desire, the need to perform better. And if you want to perform better, then you have to be better than the best. The other is that each one of us are catering to a very discerning citizenry. A citizenry which has become very demanding. A citizenry who wants to hold anyone sitting in any high position accountable for any decision that he takes or any orders that can happen in government, it can happen in the corporate entity, anywhere. But this citizenry is demanding people to come. Now, governments necessarily, as a consequence of this globalization, have to support, nurture, incubate businesses, incubate economic growth. And to the extent that they are not supportive of this, those governments are the governments which will be falling behind in a large number of ways. And despite the fact that bureaucracies, as I said, are universally despised, they have been called in a survey which was conducted by the OECD over 19 countries, plodding, inefficient, change-resistant, incompetent, unresponsive, and of course, the crowning glory, corrupt. But better still was science fiction I read. The author is Frank Herbert. The book is Heretics of Dune. And he describes bureaucrats as, he says, bureaucracy destroys initiative. There is little that bureaucrats hate more than innovation, especially innovation that produces better results than old routines. Improvements always make those at the top look inept. Bureaucracy is slothful, rule-minded, negative, rigid, and a bureaucrat is one who works by a fixed routine without exercising intelligent judgment. Nothing to do with Indian bureaucracy. This is a universal statement that Frank Herbert had made. But this is the way the world looks at a bureaucrat. Now, a factor which needs to be borne in mind is that any permanent bureaucracy, any geography, functions within the overall supervision of the political executive of that country. Theocracy, monarchy, dictatorship, parliamentary democracy. It's a political executive because it's the people who elect the legislature, members of the legislature. They then constitute a government, who constitute a council of ministers, who then appoint the ministers. And it's a bureaucracy, the permanent bureaucracy functions below the political executive, who is the minister. Now, and the last word will always be that of political executive, because in a parliamentary democracy at least, it's the politician or the member of the legislative assembly or parliament who is accountable to the people. So if I were a finance secretary and I wrote essays on files or papers, so saying X, Y, Z would not be a correct decision to take. All that the minister needed to do says, yes, well written, however I disagree, and continue to do what I am telling to do. There is nothing that a bureaucrat can do about it. He can't take the minister to court. He can't go and protest on the streets. That's it, because the political executive is the one which is going to carry the accountability to the public. Now, the bureaucracy also functions within the overall environment prevailing at any point of time. A milieu as obtaining in maybe Singapore, a milieu as obtaining in Japan, or a milieu as obtaining in Bangladesh, Pakistan, or any other country. And whereas prevarications to this abound, the Indian bureaucracy suffers from the very same ills which plague India in all walks of life. You can't have a system, a political system, which would be outstanding and excellent, and a bureaucracy which will be slothful and inefficient, or the vice versa, where you have an excellent system of bureaucrats. It was possible in 1895 or thereabouts when the British set up the Indian Civil Service, because the civil service then was working for the British Raj with India, or within India at that time, which extended, the Raj extended right to the Burma border. So it was possible, it could be done, and it was 1922 when for the first time the examination for the civil service was ordered to be conducted in India. Earlier it was being done only in the UK, in London. And at that time, Sir David Lloyd, speaking in Parliament in 1922, justifying this decision, he said, he referred to the Indian Civil Service as the steel frame. And he said, if you take the steel frame out, the fabric will collapse. There is one institution we will not cripple. There is one institution we will not deprive of its functions or its privileges. And that is that institution which built up the British Raj, the British Civil Service in India. That civil service was functioning for the British within this country. And the superior nature of that civil service was then recognized. It was recognized universally. I have a comparison which was done in 1935 when it was said that a secretary from the ICS due rupees 6,666 in 1935. That was double the salary of the US Secretary of Treasury at that point of time. So things changed, India gained independence. There was a huge amount of debate whether the civil service should be continued the way it was. It was Sardar followed by Patel, who put his foot down and said, no, we need to have a civil service, though chief ministers of the states did not want a civil service at that time because they thought the civil service would be controlled by the federal government, the union government, and they would rather have a civil service controlled by the state governments. But on 21st of April 1947, speaking to a group of civil servants, he says, a civil servant cannot afford to and must not take part in politics, nor must he involve himself in any communal wrangles. To depart from the path of rectitude in either of these respects is to debase public service and to lower its dignity. Unhappily, and he's saying this in 1947, unhappily India today cannot boast of an incorruptible service. But I hope that you who are now starting, as it were, a new generation of civil servants will not be misled by black sheep in the fold, but would render your services without fear or favor and without any expectation of extraneous rewards. This was 1947, and he was saying that we can't boast of a service which can be called incorruptible. Now, what happened to the civil service going forward? Why is it that Ambassador Pillai said that if you ask whether the civil service in India has delivered, you will get an overwhelmingly negative response? And I think we need to ask this question again, that have politicians of India delivered? Has the legal system in India delivered? And now, and I stress it, has the judicial system in India delivered? What is the environment, what's the milieu in which we are functioning and which we are? Now, what happened? I don't want to go into too many details. I just list out some of the issues which I think have led to the pass that the civil service has come to. One is short tenures of posting, where an officer is posted, where he has to settle down, he is moved around, and I'll deal with them on some details. Increasing political interference, I'll tell you why I justify political interference. Declining quality of incumbents. Why has the quality of incumbents declined? inadequate monetary compensation to attract the best talent, though I really do not give too much of credence to this. I'll tell you why. Lack of specialization in a complex administrative environment as it obtains today, and relatively greater attraction for political alignment. And why does that also come about? Finally, there is an opaque system of appraisal by which our performance gets appraised. Now, it has to be recognized that over the last 25 years, maybe 30 years, regional parties in India have come to exercise great amount of political influence. We have had coalition governments. We have had coalition governments in the center. We have had coalition partners exercising influence wholly disproportionate to their representation in the political setup within the government. And when this happens, it's the regional interest which prevails over the national interest. And then pulls and pressures start operating. And the easiest for this is to try and harass bureaucrats. Let's talk about the higher bureaucracy, since I refer to the ICS, bureaucrats into towing their line ostensibly on the ground that from the 73rd Amendment to the 74th Amendment, India has adopted a system of Panchayati Raj government where the local governments have greater participation in governance. The local politician or the local member of the legislative assembly will want to have his say. And if he can't have his say, the easiest is, I'll get you transferred. That's fair. Bureaucrats like us, all of us are prepared to be transferred place to place. One doesn't mind it. And you must have heard, I just mentioned one name, a gentleman called Ashok Khemka, a 1990 batch officer of the Haryana cadre, who in 27 years of service has been transferred 40 times. Because endemic, and he claims that endemic corruption is something which he was trying to bring the forth, but he kept moving. Maybe an extreme case. But still, in a service of 27 years, I would expect a person to be not transferred more than 9 times. At least a tenure of 3 years. Each one of you would accept would be. But it happens. And why does it kill motivation or morale? At that age, each one of us has a family and children to educate. You can't have children shifting 6 months, 8 months, 9 months from school to school. Then what happens is, each one of us starts leaving the family in the state headquarters and moving around by yourself with one suitcase. And that's why the sobriquet suitcase officers was coined, where officers were moving from a place with one suitcase, because you had a tenure of 6 months. Times of India did a survey of 2,139 IAS officers and found that 2/3 of these officers had done tenures of 18 months and less. So by the time you've gotten to a job, you've settled down, you've been moved out. And let's forget the states. Let's go down to the union government. Post 2014, this was a study done by Economic Times. It is reported that major departments in the government of India, I'm talking about ministries, chemicals, petrochemicals, school education, rural development, urban development, posts, Department of Northeastern Region, minority affairs, each one of these has seen 5 secretaries from 2014. There are departments, textiles, minority affairs, etc., 4 secretaries from 2014, which means barely 6 to 9 months that you've been on a desk. It has to be accepted that for a person to be able to perform, he has to get into the job first, understand what the job is all about, and then get on with it. Now, political interference. That fact that there is political interference at the state level, I'll give you a couple of examples. There was this fairly prominent case about 3 years back of a lady officer of the 2010 batch, an officer called Durga Shaktinath Pal. She was the subdivisional magistrate of Noida, which is barely a stone's throw from New Delhi, but that's part of the UP administration. Now, in India, there is a bit of a cozy club. Electoral politics has become very expensive. Big money comes into play. That cozy club is of the person seeking election and a person doing business. Business not really of the very legal kind. So money gets generated, and this money, so there is a scratch my back relationship between them. Now, what happened is this was, she got information of rampant, illegal, large-scale removal of sand from the bed of the river after nightfall. This was Durga Shakti. She enforced police patrolling and registered 66 FIRs, arrested 104 persons, and confiscated 81 vehicles. Now, this attracted the attention of local politicians because they were the ones providing protection to this illegal sand mining which was taking place. But this lady had gained a fair amount of public acclaim. How do they take her on? It was very difficult to protest that she was not doing well and hence could be removed. So they did a very simple thing, and this was done by the local Samajwadi Party of that area, because the chief minister then, the young chief minister who came to power on ostensibly on a plank of providing good governance, she got an illegally constructed wall adjacent to a mosque demolished. The wall had been, it was proven that it was illegal, she just got it removed. This demolition was orchestrated into a communal unrest, and to generate communal interest is very easy. You have 40 people, 50 people, round them up and lead a procession. And the state headquarters was told that this lady is acting without listening to the local people, and her actions are leading to communal unrest. That's it. She was removed, she was transferred out of there. Now, any number of these cases, I'll give you another case which has happened only about 3 months back in my own state, Kerala. A collector was posted in this district called, it was called Alleppey earlier, it's called Alappuzha now. 3 months into the job, she just looked at normal job that a district collector is supposed to do, encroachment on public land. She filed some reports. As misfortune had it, one of the reports was encroachment done by a resort. That resort was owned by a gentleman called Thomas Chandy, who happened to be the transport minister in the state. Kerala being Kerala, he tried to brazen it out, but one of the parties in the coalition, the Communist Party of India, said no, there is a case against him, and we won't attend the cabinet meetings unless the minister resigns. So he did have to resign. The collector is still surviving, but I am counting every Monday to Friday for her. Let's see how long she survived. She's been there for 5.5 months. Now, then there is declining quality of human capital. Lots of people have talked about it. We were discussing before the beginning of this. When some of us joined service, you will recall that the age limits were you had to be minimum 21, maximum 24. For reserved classes, it was 27. The idea was catch them young, mold them, make them a political 2 years training, teach them what administration is all about, and that's the time when the mind is impressionable, can be molded. Over time, now the minimum age remains 21, the maximum age has gone up to 32 for general candidates and 37 for reserve candidates. And my point is, if you are recruited at say 32, the age of retirement continues to be 60. So whether you are recruited at 22 or 32, you will retire at 60 itself. Now, when you are going to be recruited at 32 or 33, you have a career span of 27 years or 28 years. Indian governmental system where promotions are seniority based, there is no way in which you will be able to reach the highest level, which in our system is a permanent secretary to the government. If you are lucky, you will reach the level of an additional secretary. Now, if I were to join the service at the age of 33 or 34 and knew that irrespective of whichever way outstandingly I performed, I would not make it to be Secretary to Government of India, what would my career aspiration be? I would have no career aspiration. And that's the time when I get caught up in lots of other attractions that come about. Maybe political alignment, maybe if my moral fiber is weak, that's when malfeasance takes over. Now, there was about 2011 a committee set up by government to re-examine this entire thing. 2 administrative reforms commission has already been set up, 1969 and 2005, to go into these aspects. Their recommendations have been made saying that the age of recruitment must be brought down. 2005 recommendations were not followed. Yet another committee was set up in 2011 by the government under the Union Public Service Commission, which recruits government officials. The then Election Commissioner, Chief Election Commissioner Dr. Qureshi and myself, we were also asked to advise this committee, and we made very strong recommendations to reduce the age of recruitment. We made presentations to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister believed that yes, there is merit in the argument. However, he was very frank and forthright. He says, but politically I will not be able to push this. So that recommendation, which has been made by 2 Administrative Reforms Commission, continues to be on paper itself, and that's it. Now, I really do not want to say much about compensation, because I think compensation to a civil servant can be only what the benchmark, it can be benchmarked only to the governmental system as it obtains in the country. You can't have the civil servant being paid market salaries, whereas the rest of the government servants are not paid those salaries. And I sincerely believe that the Pay Commission has recommended in 2016, the pay scales are fairly comfortable. I mean, they are not nowhere near what the market pay scales are. For example, I mean, the 1935 example I gave you about the ICS secretary, the present Secretary of Government draws about 3 million. State Bank, the State Bank Chairperson draws about the same amount. Isn't that right? The Chairperson of a small private bank will draw in the range of about 30 million. And in this Chairman of a large bank, private bank in India, draws about 50 million. That's the disparity. But I still believe that anybody who joins government, anybody who joins the government service is not looking for monetary compensation alone. There are a large number of other factors wherein this comes to play. But there is an attraction, of course. The best, maybe 30 years back, did apply for the civil service, and the best did make it to the British, to the civil service. Today, possibly, the best do not apply for the civil service, because there are a larger number of avenues which are probably in some ways more fulfilling, certainly better compensated. Now, I need to say a word about professionalism and the human capital that is obtained. If the civil servant is being moved around the way he is being moved around, where does he get a chance to be able to specialize in the kind of job that he should be doing. For the first 10 to 15 years, he's supposed to work in the field, absolutely excellent arrangement, because he must understand how government delivers at the ground level. He must understand the leakages, the fallacies, and the glitches that occur when government schemes, government projects, government developmental programs are being purveyed, and why do they or do they not reach the person that they are meant to reach. But after that, the world today is becoming, administration today is becoming far more complex than ever before. To be able to do town planning, to be able to do infrastructure arrangement, to be able to contribute to the power sector, to contribute to any other of these, I've talked only about the infrastructure areas, you need to have some knowledge, some specialization. I don't say that the bureaucrat must become an IT czar or an IT expert, information technology expert. But after a certain level, depending upon his educational background, depending upon his aptitude, depending upon the experience that he's gained in the service, he needs to be given specialized training to be able to, maybe in a finance area, maybe in an infrastructure area, maybe health, maybe education. These are the most demanding sectors today. And it's essential for a bureaucrat who is handling, say, the health sector at the secretary level to have some basic understanding. He need not be a doctor, but he needs to be trained, he needs to be specialized to be able to handle it. Unfortunately, that is not happening, and that's not happening because it's not because the Prime Minister doesn't want it or the Minister doesn't want it. The systems have not been put in place. I did a course in Harvard, came back and was posted to the Defense Ministry where none of my learnings or my orientation could be put to any kind of use. That again was a different thing, but it's not my attitude which was put to any kind of thing. I have also mentioned about how political alignments and malfeasance is leading to malfeasance. I'll give you an example, and the example is of a chief minister who is very well known, and this example I picked out from a book written by Manish Jha and Pushpin. This is of Mr. Lalu Prasad Yadav when he was chief minister of Bihar. And I quote, "To make the bureaucracy defunct," this is the authors of the book, "to make the bureaucracy defunct, ineffective and vulnerable to demands and whims of the elected leaders of the backward classes, it was necessary to centralize power in the chief minister, humiliate the bureaucracy in the public grace, punish it by frequent transfers and postings, and frequently overrule its decisions. For the first time in post-independence Bihar, the fear of the administration and police started waning from the minds of the lower caste people. All sorts of symbolism were used. One powerful symbol used to be pictures of Lalu Prasad, often in newspapers, where he would keep his feet on the center table on the lawn of his residence, and bureaucrats would either stand or sit in front facing his feet. Stories abound about how he would speak in rustic language with his officers and would amount to hurt and humiliation in a civilized parliamentary culture. He would visit poor people and introduce himself as the Raja, the king of the state, and would advise people to be fearless of their sevaks over the bureaucrats. The 15 years of the Lalu Rabri regime witnessed the lowest number of police firings and lathi charges on the masses. He would prevail over rules as well as rationality to ensure support to his caste members and other OBCs even when they acted against the law. Ultimately, the administration lost the power to resist and bowed to the will of the politician. That's the conclusion reached by the authors. Now, these are the predilections which in recent times have been gaining momentum. There are a large number of bureaucrats who have withstood it. I don't say, and they should be able to withstand it. I think they are trained to withstand it. But there are weaker amongst us, maybe me, who succumb to it, and easier than resist is to go along with the bureaucracy. And I know, with politicians. And I know I'm not going to make it to the top of the bureaucracy, so why not align with the politician and make hay while the sun shines? Now, there is also another set of bureaucrats, and this was being discussed as that in the state, the bureaucracy somehow doesn't seem to be as responsive or as sensitized as it is in some states as in some other states, or in the center. Yes, that's also. Because what happens is, bureaucrats who find that they do not have a career aspiration, they would rather remain in the cozy confines of the state. The central government picks officers, police officers or IAS officers from the states and brings them to the center. When you are in the center, you are pitted against the best that is being picked out from the other states. There's a challenge, there's competition, you perform well. But there are those group of people who don't feel it necessary to go to the center. Why should they expose themselves to or rather expose their incapability or their desire not to work at the center? They continue to be cozy in their confines because they know that over a period of time, 20 years, they'll get a higher grade, 25 years, they'll get a still higher grade, 30 years, they'll still get a higher grade. So why do they subject themselves to any kind of work culture which is not convenient to them? And you will find bureaucracy in some of the states to be in that state where they have not been able to be as good as neighboring states or maybe even at the center. Then of course we've had problems on the process of appraisal which have changed over time, and well, that is something which can be remedied, is being remedied, and I think the present government has done quite a bit in going forward to ensure that there is some kind of a 360-degree being done to ensure that appraisals are of a kind which would ensure objectivity in the upward movement of these officers. Now, in a way, going forward, what I would recommend is some of the issues which I mentioned earlier. And I really wouldn't want to touch the pay scale. Compensation packages can be tinkered with, but I don't think that is any cause for bureaucrats not being able to perform. It is a very low factor in the entire thing. What I would like to talk about is ensure fixity of tenures. Ensure that a person once posted is there for 3 years and he is not at the mercy of the local politicians for being moved and not being moved. We have had any number of recommendations. We have had the Supreme Court which has given a verdict saying there should be what is known as a Central Services Board which should sit and deliberate on posting officers to areas where their expertise would be of benefit and keeping them there, not moving them for reasons which cannot stand the scrutiny, with the test of scrutiny. So, but despite the Supreme Court having said that, no government is bothered to set up this. The other is, which I mentioned, a certain degree of specialization has become absolutely essential. If I have to function the finance ministry, I've done it over 15 years, the state or the center, I need to be trained in certain newer techniques, newer paradigms, so that when I'm dealing with anything that is the best in the private sector or anything that's best outside the country, I am also on the same page. But unfortunately, knowledges have not kept. Or what is happening is that an officer, as recently as about 4 years back, Secretary Industry, 7 months later, Secretary Defense, 9 months later, Secretary Finance, and he had no background of finance ever before. If you keep moving at this rapid rate, obviously, for very obvious reason, you will not be able to perform. Because by the time you've dug your heels in, you've been moved out. And I think that is where training is necessary, for the simple reason that especially IAS and IPS officers have a huge amount of public dealing. The sensitivities and sensibilities of the local populace in, say, the northeast areas or the south or J&K are very different from each other. And if you have to be trained there, you have to be sensitized and oriented towards each one of these. And I think this training can very easily be imparted. Each one of us goes for training at different points in time. And only thing is that this has to be made specialized. The last is the age factor. If a person, as I mentioned earlier, joins service at the age of 33, he's obviously been to 2 or 3 jobs earlier. He brings to the civil service all the baggage that he's picked up of those jobs, those assignments. And at the same time, at 33 years of age, he's certainly married, has at least 1 child. And there is no way in which you can mold him to be apolitical or mold him to say that he should be honest or whatever, whichever way you want to mold a good civil servant. So that age must be restricted to maybe 24 or 25. 25 was what was recommended by the Administrative Reforms Commission. Unfortunately, no government acted upon it. 10 years. Remarkable case in 2004. There is a Supreme Court ruling and government has accepted that tenure of the Cabinet Secretary has to be minimum 2 years. When the government took power in 2004, there was a serving Cabinet Secretary. The Prime Minister introduced him to another gentleman and said, he takes over from you tomorrow. And the serving Cabinet Secretary had not even finished 1 year of his tenure. No answers given why X was being removed and why being placed in it. There was no reason why the norms should have been flouted, but the Cabinet Secretary. So if you can remove the highest civil servant only at your whims, then down the line every other politician sees this happening and he has to go help. There is also a very strong case for lateral entry of private people or specialists into the civil service. And I think we need to have civil servants moving out, spending 5 years, 7 years into the private sector, imbibing those cultures, the values, or if nothing else, seeing what are the difficulties that they face when they are dealing with the government. And at the same time, there are a large number of people today who are willing to set aside 3 years or 5 years of their own career aspirations to come join in government and then help perform help development of government or whatever it may be. So time has come when this kind of movements have become essential, and I'm sure that they will add value to the system of administration. Now, I come back to the point that the bureaucracy is much maligned, it's slothful, and it is not good performing. All those maybe definitions of bureaucracy are accurate and are correct. But at the same time, we need to recognize the fact that this very same bureaucracy, when it does not subserve a political executive, why does it perform better? Now I'm giving you the case of, say, the Election Commission. Election Commission is its own agency, it reports to itself. There is no minister for election. Why is it that the Election Commission, year after year, has been able to deliver zero error elections in the country without any glitch? Why is it the same bureaucracy, right from the election commissioner to the school teacher who is the polling agent or the poll person? Why is he able to perform? because that is the time when he is totally isolated from any kind of influence, and he's given the protection to be isolated. While the Information Commission, which again is the constitutional body, took on the political setup and said even political parties will have to inform or to disclose the sources of their funding. It has not been accepted as yet, because all the political parties, irrespective of their political affiliations or their thoughts, closed ranks and took on the Information Commission on that. Why is it the Auditor-General in any system, because he has constitutional protection, can take on an irregularity which occurs or a misdemeanor which occurs in government and brings it to light or in public? Why is it that the same bureaucracy, in conducting a small event, which is not really a small event, but is defined as the largest event or gathering in the world, the Kumbh Mela, 50,000 security personnel, 40,000 officials deployed every day, 40 hospitals set up, 540 doctors on call every day to manage the crowds, and we are able to deliver. So I think when we look at the bureaucracy, when we talk about the bureaucracy, you can't talk about what Mr. Pillai himself said. Bureaucracy does not function in vacuum. It functions within an overall milieu. It is bad. It probably is worse than what it is anywhere else. But it can at best be benchmarked as good or otherwise in the milieu that it functions. Thank you for a patient hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Rai. It is my pleasure to invite Ambassador Gopinath Pillai on stage to chair the question and answer session. I will now hand the floor to Ambassador Pillai.
Thank you. Well, maybe we can straight away start with the questions. Yes, please identify yourself. Keep it as crisp as possible. Long speeches are discouraged. Questions are allowed.
Thank you. A lovely session. My name is Ranveer Singh Chauhan. I work in the private sector here. I hear your views, all very valid. I would like to understand, do you consider Indian bureaucracy a possible force for change, a possible positive force for change?
I have no doubt in my mind when I say that not only can it be made a positive force for change, but it is attuned to that and will be able to deliver when called upon. I don't see acceptance when he smiles, but why I say this is, the elephant is beginning to dance. The ease of doing business reports which are emerging from the country today are indicative of the fact that over the last 3 to 4 years, bureaucracy has come a long way and is indeed beginning to turn positive. I don't claim that it's meeting even the standards that I would want it to meet, let alone what you would want it to, but it certainly is. It's only a question of how well you deploy the bureaucrats.
Thank you. Excellent presentation.
I come from what is a brother service to yours. I mean, British India had three components, of course, eventually India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. And I had the privilege of serving in two of those services, of Pakistan and Bangladesh. And everything you said about India is, of course, very relevant to the other two countries. You started with Sardar Patel's decision to keep an all-India frame service. Now, I would assume, and I'm also aware, that he did this to prevent centrifugal forces from countering centrifugal forces so that the disintegration of the Central Union does not happen easily. I mean, Sardar Patel was not the kind of man who would have supported something like this thing of bureaucracy if it wasn't for a purpose. And the purpose was to deliver on perhaps national integration. National integration, and in 47 I'd assume that most people were appointed on merit. I mean, though the last ICS was recruited in 1944, but in 47 all the members of the Indian Civil Service, later transformed to the All India IAS, were mostly on merit. Thereafter one had, because of the political needs and necessities, introduced reservations. Eventually, I think the Supreme Court had ruled that not more than 50% could be reserved. So you had a situation where merit had to be pitted against reservations. Now, reservations probably to a degree compromised the efficiency of the All India service. In your view, did that impact on the delivery? In other words, if All India service were allowed to remain the same as the imperial civil service of pre-independence years, Indian civil service would have been able to deliver more, even national integration, both on the social level and the spatial level. I mean, with regard to territorial integration as well as integration across caste, religious lines. Now, because of this reservation again, you also had to be committed, you had to represent the caste or the religion or the ethnicity that you represented. So all these had led you to be committed to various allegiances. Did that compromise the ability or the capacity of the service to deliver?
Certainly not. And I'll tell you why. Because the material that was being made available to join the civil service was so good that from the general persons, the best was being picked out, and even if it was being picked out from the reserve candidates, they were the best. And today, I can point out a large spectrum of people who are from the reserve category, but have performed as good as any one of us otherwise has performed. So I don't think reservations have in any way debilitated the performance of the service or could reduce its quality. Reservations are there, it's a fact, it has happened, but you must acknowledge that of the people who take the service, who take the examination, maybe about 200,000 reserve candidates who take the examination, the best among those 200,000 is being picked up. And the number who make it, say, to the IAS would be barely 40. So you can't fault the quality of those officers.
Mishra?
Okay, my question is actually on the civil service actually rising up to develop good governance. You know, in cases whereby, especially in the less sensitive government ministries, let's say, you know, when the minister is less efficient or less intelligent than PERMSEC, can the PERMSEC actually step up to do the job of the minister, whereby the minister just becomes a stamp, a rubber stamp? And actually that leads me to wonder whether do you think the Indian civil service can actually evolve to have some kind of, you know, informal power sharing between the political masters and the civil servants, and which is why I also wonder whether can the civil service actually collude with the Indian judiciary to protect the civil servants, and ensure they have some kind of independence, like, you mentioned about fixed tenures, whereby there's, no political interference. Can the civil service collude with the judiciary to protect themselves? Thank you.
Number one, even if the political, or the minister, as you said, is incompetent, there is no way in which he will accept he is incompetent. He has a political constituency, and to that political constituency who has elected him, he will ensure that his diktat works. So he will never accept that, and there is no question of formal or otherwise power sharing. The second thing that you said was the bureaucracy colluding with the judiciary. There is no such thing. There is no such thing. The judiciary is independent, totally independent, and the question of collusion just doesn't arise. The judiciary adjudicates on what is right, what is not wrong, what is legal, what is illegal. There is no way in which they will be colluding with any other entity or any other institution.
Thank you, Chairman. I had a quick question about the admission requirements and how it has evolved over time. Would you say over the past decade or 2 decades or so, have we seen more professionals, engineers, doctors, MBAs entering the service compared to earlier when we had this image of a humanities/liberal arts kind of person who was not specialized but had a larger view of the world, in contrast to what we see now, much more professionals entering the service? And is that linked to the way the exams are conducted currently?
See, the examination pattern has undergone a change, and there was a cycle in which quantitative people with better quantitative skills did make it into the service, but one can't really fault it. Even among those, the ones who are getting in with the best. And what is wrong in an engineer coming into the civil service? What's wrong in a doctor coming into the civil service? Maybe after 10 or 15 years of working in the service, his specialization can be utilized. He will not be, what is it called, a round hole in a square peg or whatever it is. He would actually fit an infrastructure ministry or a health ministry or an education ministry. So yes, there was a cycle in which a large number of engineers and such other technical skilled personnel were getting into the services, but I think it's gone back to the earlier system again.
Yes, Mr. Pandey, did you have something? Coming.
I think you very well gave us an idea of the challenge that faces the civil service right from independence. And as you know, I've seen it in my family, to my siblings, and how the challenges happen. The question I'm asking is, do you really think, given that the state is now moving, the government is moving out of many parts of the economy, privatizing, etc., and transparency coming in because of digitization, because of anti-corruption movements, do you really need the IAS as it exists, or do you morph it into more specialists and fewer generalists? Because if you continue as it is, this challenge with political interference, etc., as you very nicely can see it will continue. Is there a need to morph it into something very different?
I argued for just that. I said the time for a generalist civil service is no longer prevalent. You need to specialize them into those areas in which they either have an aptitude or a background. So there is need, after about 15 years of being in the service, to switch over to some element of specialization, and I even made the point that there is scope for lateral entry of specialized people from the private sector coming into the government and helping government make that metamorphosis and that change from a purely regimented regulatory framework to a development-oriented framework where it's supportive of the business interests that are the need that they are today. So there is a requirement for that, and I make a strong recommendation that there is need to train civil servants to specialize in certain areas, health, education, infrastructure, whatever it may be, or finance.
I'd like to draw upon the last sentence that you mentioned, that bureaucracy doesn't work in a vacuum. And there are two aspects to this. One is the initial mention of globalization, and it's inevitably resulting in a greater demand for accountability from public servants as well as politicians. This is also leading to greater role for market forces in the economy. Do you see that as an inexorable force which is going to induce competition and enhanced efficiency within the bureaucracy? It's also how it's showing up states and ministries which are lagging behind other states and ministries. And the second aspect is, if you contrast with China, which is a one-party system, yet promotions for bureaucrats, for regional mayors and province leaders is entirely contingent upon the economic performance. And that's resulted in a bureaucratic structure which has given a great deal of leeway, including innovating policies and going out and taking risks. An area in which we tend to be very, the Indian bureaucracy tends to be very risk averse. Do you see any takeaways from that experience and how it could be accommodated in the current setup?
See, the performance of the ease of doing business, which I talked about, I briefly mentioned it. What has happened today is that every state government is now competing with every other state government to ensure that its economic performance is better. And if there is going to be sustainable development over a long period of time, it will have to be incubated with a good governance setup. So when in India, time will come, and I think time has begun in that region, where the politician and the bureaucrat will both be compelled to perform better. And I see those green shoots already when each of the states are vying with each other for global investor meets, for inviting people to come and set up industries in their states. You were talking about Badi in Himachal the other day. That is an area as a consequence of which every state government will be pitted against every other state government, and the bureaucracy will necessarily have to stand up and perform. And I think those demands are already being made.
So my name is Pawan Sushdev. It was a privilege to listen to you. I just, in continuation of Girija's earlier thought, I think one stat which stands out is by 2030, 2.5% of India's area will have 40% of India's population, as we were discussing before. And cities should be seen as a strategic tool for economic growth. And there is probably a need, in line with what talk you had, to have a dedicated Indian urban services so that we can take care of that infrastructure. If we have a 100 city plan or 200 city plan as China has, unless we move in that direction, and I'm telling this from a little bit of experience, when I spoke to say 3 water utilities last year, as you rightly said, if I go to one water utility, in 1 year the 3 CEOs have come and gone. In 1 year. So unless we have dedicated urban services, I think that's the need of our art, because that's a strategic tool to grow India overall.
Absolutely so. Absolutely so. There's no doubt in fact that what you're saying is required. We talk about growing 100 smart cities. Smart cities need not be smart in terms of IT alone. They require physical infrastructure. They require water. They require power. They require a drainage system. They require a system of roads. And that's what we need to plan for, because this migration which is taking place towards the urban areas is very alarming. And unless we are able to cater for it, it will put a huge amount of pressure on the infrastructure facilities that are prevailing in these prevalent cities.
Lady? Yes.
Hi, my name is Supriti Sethi. A little bit of background from my side. I was working with a Japanese management consulting firm for about 2.5 years. So most of my study and my work experience comes from Japan. And after having lived and worked in Japan, I wanted to work in India. And at that time, I got an opportunity working as in the Ministry of Home Affairs in India. And it was a very good opportunity for me, but sadly, as all the challenges that you had just mentioned, that unlike all ministries, even Ministry of Home Affairs had a similar situation where meritocracy was compromised and there was lack of transparency. So I see it as not only an Indian civil service problem, I think it's a central government or a government problem in all. And I really resonated with your points which you just mentioned right now. So for me, I think it's more like a chicken and egg situation where the meritocracy is compromised. We don't have lateral hires as you highlighted. The training programs are inadequate, or even if they are a scam. And there's lack of transparency. I saw a lot of funds being misused, shamelessly being misallocated. So what's your take about how do we break this chicken and egg situation of lack of transparency and where meritocracy is being compromised?
I empathize with you. I agree that there is a certain amount of opacity in the functioning of government in these areas. But I made the point that today the citizenry has come center stage and they are demanding a far more accountable system. They are holding their government to account, and whether it's the RTI or whether it's any of these things, I've seen any of these programs at the field level, at the panchayat level, where the panchayat secretary or the block development officer or the engineer is called upon to explain his actions in a large number of ways, and he's being questioned. So I think what has happened is that the push which is coming from the public at large, fairly informed, educated, young population that India is throwing up, educated in a large number of ways and not being able to find adequate employment, they are going to ensure that the government is on notice, or government officials are on notice all the time, and soon a situation will come about where they will not be able to go ahead with this kind of opacity that you talked about, where there will be misallocations and nothing could be done about it.
Sorry, I'll come to you in a minute.
My name is Satya, I work in the private sector. Thank you for the outstanding presentation, sir. I want to extend the urbanization theme a little more and get your insights on an important question. So if you look at Indonesia, a lot of the leaders who are emerging there are city mayors who are doing a lot of good. The question I have for you is devolution of power to the city organizations, given the extent of urbanization that's happening. Do you see that how do you see that evolving in India? Because given the power that the cities are going to generate in terms of income and taxes and so on, a lot can be done if that devolution happens. But I'm sure there's issues around the structure of the states, which requires a lot of the surpluses to flow back to the rural areas. So what do you see happening in that space?
There is no lack of devolution of powers at all. City bodies today, I talked about the 73rd and 74th amendments, city systems, local self-governments have enough and more powers in terms of authority. Finance commissions, which are set up every 5 years, the Finance Commission verdicts have all gone in favor of the city governments. So in terms of powers and funds available to city governments, there is no lack of it. As Finance Secretary in Kerala for 5 years, I used to say that on the one hand, you have the center with its powers to raise revenues. On the other hand, more and more devolution is being given to the city governments. The state was losing. So in terms of the Mumbai Municipal Corporation, their budget is larger than the state budget of Gujarat. They have no inadequacy of powers to be able to operationalize that budget. It's only a question of how best the elected body can do it. And on the other hand, you have the Municipal Corporation of Delhi, which is going into negative. They don't have adequate resources. only because they are not able to collect the taxes that they are supposed to. So, in terms of devolution of powers, there is no problem at all. They have enough powers. In terms of powers to raise revenues, there is no lack of powers. It's only a question of exercising those powers and operationalizing.
Yes, the lady here. Yeah.
Hello, thank you so much for explaining the contextual factors that impacts the Indian civil service. My name is Sumrita and I'm doing PhD in communication from NUS. My question is, I'd like to know if it depends on which political party is in power, like the interference of political actors in the state civil service, or is it the same with any party?
No, I don't think it's specific to any political party. It's across the spectrum, across the political system. It's not so much interference, but the fact that the political executive wants to be doing things by themselves. And if it's not to their requirement, then they make the change.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Abhijit Thakur. I work in the private sector. You gave a background of the colonial past for India. You quoted the 1947 quote by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. India inheriting the ICS. Now, when we look at Singapore, it also had colonial roots. So, why there is such a huge disparity between the way the bureaucracy or the overall government and the government officials function here in Singapore versus in India? And I would like to take you back, you just quoted some 60-70 years ago this quote by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. I would like to take you 5,000 years ago, wherein Arjun asked about why one is impelled to do sinful activities. Lord Krishna, he gave a very common sense answer where he says, Kamesha, Krodhesha, Rajoguna Samudbhava. Now for those who do not understand this language, the essence is, the blessed Lord said, it is lust only, Arjun, which is born of contact with the material modes of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So, in India, which is the root of all this knowledge, we are unable to experiment with it or use it. And we have Singapore, which technically has no technical religious background or any sort of original value system, is able to put this kind of values in place. So can you throw some light on what went wrong there?
India has also had Ramrajya. India was also known as once upon a time Sone ki Chidiya, and a golden bird. I mean, things have not gone wrong in that sense. You can't juxtapose a Singaporean system on an Indian system or vice versa and expect them to perform. So Liu Kuan Yew himself, in 3 of his books that I've read, he's made some prescriptions for India, and he has gone to the extent of saying that, correct me if I'm wrong, he said democracy is too costly an experiment for India. He in fact told this to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi also, that democracy is too expensive, too costly an experiment. Now, why it has worked in Singapore, why it has worked, it will take me the best of tonight and tomorrow morning to explain to you. The systems are very different, and if Sri Krishna was justifying sin, then or explaining why sin occurs, there are a large number of other factors, and neighboring countries, one performing so well, the other not performing well. Systems were part of the same, one part of that. There are factors which are very different, very divergent. And basically, it's the people who matter. It's the government who they elect that matters. And I think the fault, we need not fault the politician or the bureaucrat all the time. We need ultimately fault ourselves. Because each one of us deserves the bureaucracy and the government that we have elected.
Gentleman, that's, yeah. Oh, sorry.
He's not a gentleman?
Almost there, as an ex-civil servant. My question is on the Right to Information Act. Do you think the Right to Information Act has made the bureaucracy less proactive, in the sense it's now the onus on the accountability? So has it made the bureaucrats less willing to take decisions and commit to processes?
See, the right to information has gone full circle, it's got 180 degrees. The misuse through that right to information has certainly made anybody in authority very cautious about the kind of decisions or the advice that he is giving. Because there has been a considerable amount of misuse of this right to information. So yes, it has introduced an element of caution in the process of decision making.
Maybe one last question. Yes. Mitra.
It's a great privilege to have you with us, because you have seen the evolution of the Indian state from the welfare state, the Mai-Baap, which had to deliver roti, kapda, makan, to a state which can only deliver regulations. It's a different kind of state. The two questions to you are, has the concept of delivery itself changed? What is a civil servant expected to deliver today as compared to what he used to have to deliver in the old days under the welfare state? Second, is it still the heaven-born service which attracted at one point the best and the brightest? Is the civil service still attracting the kind of talent that it did in the old days?
What the civil service is expected to deliver is far more complex than what it was earlier. No denying that factor. What it was delivering, say, 60 years back was very fundamental, very pedestrian as compared to what they are expected to deliver now. And the complexities in that delivery process are far more substantial. So that's why it calls upon their capabilities, their qualities, their competence to be able to deliver. And when we talk of the civil service, we often talk only of the IAS, but ultimately it's bureaucracy at the lowest level, which is in fact doing the delivery of those services. And it's that delivery which does the last mile, where the leakages occur. I'm not saying that the leakages don't occur on the top, but this is where they have to be plugged. And I think that's where the problem lies. So it is far more complex. It's second part of the question was?
Does the heaven-born still attract talent?
The heaven-born or born, where it was. It is definitely attracting talent, which is, if not the best, the very best, or near the very best today. Because the opportunities that have opened up in the country are very substantial. So, but it's not everybody who gets the best of jobs, or in the batch of people who joined in 2016, not 2016, there were 11 people who were from the IIMs. Why should they have, after graduating from the, besides MBA schools, B schools, any number of them, there were 11 of them from the IIMs. Why did they have a change of mind when they joined for the civil service? They must have been the best, that's why they got admission to the IIM, and they had to be the best to get. So it still attracts the best or near the best. No doubt in my mind about that.
But what is the incentive? I mean, you have yourself said that the compensation is not comparable to small bank managers, that they have to put up with the likes of Lalu Prasad Yadav, that they have to be constantly on call, and then there is terrorism, and. So if I think of comparative advantage, civil service today certainly doesn't compare to corporate jobs, or for that matter, the old days, the foreign service had a big glamour, and today you find, even in small companies, they offer comparable advantages. I'm so simply making a case. Okay.
Let me answer that question as an I am Ahmedabad graduate. I made that choice in this very long career. I've never had a moment of regret about compensation packages, including in Singapore, several of my classmates probably earn multiple times than I do. So I think if people make choices, if the world followed only one principle, it wouldn't have the diversity that it has, and it wouldn't be able to accomplish all the things it should be. It was preferred being a professor. I mean, you might have done something else that might have paid you a little more, but obviously you get more satisfaction out of it. And I think even today there are a large number of people in India, young people, who join the civil service for the sheer desire to serve the people. I mean, that service is still integral to the choices that young people are making in India, despite the opportunity costs that they have.
Professor Mitra, given the opportunity, today I would still join the civil service. Because I've been able to, how much of compensation do I require? I've been able to educate my children in the best available schools. I can assure you, my wife doesn't fault me for not allowing her enough to shop wherever she wants to shop. I have an apartment of my own. What more do I need? And we do drive 2 cars. What more do I need? So ultimately, there is no end to the amount of monetary compensation that anyone of us would seek. But in terms of fulfillment, I don't think there is any service anywhere else in the world which provides me the fulfillment that I have got in the service.
Thank you. I think with that I have to call it a day. Let me just clarify one point, something that Peter brought up about merit, how the Chinese are able to do it. The Chinese are the ones who actually recognize merit long before any of the other races. They instituted the examination system, and how even if you're a farmer's son, you could go right up to the emperor's palace, marry the emperor's daughter, provided you go through the entire examination system and you prove yourself. India still has not got to that. You mentioned, I think Mr. Thakur, you mentioned about Singapore. I think again it is on meritocracy. It is the emphasis placed on the fact that you have done extremely well. Whatever, you're a plumber, you're a mechanic, whatever it is, be the best you can. Even in our technical education, if you drop out from secondary school, you can't go up further because you're not done it well. You can join the ITE. From ITE, if you are ambitious enough, you go to Polytechnic. From Polytechnic, you go, if you work hard and you are able to get into a tertiary institution, you get tertiary education. That recognition is there. India, where while it talked about, make India, what did they do after that? This is not the civil servants. I won't blame the civil servants. I'll blame the system. Even the investments that I've had in India, where you get good managers, the company takes off. Where you get managers who take shortcuts to make money. It's not a good operation that they look for, but how do I earn? This partly because of the disparity of income that Professor Mitra mentioned. This is true. I cannot fault the policeman who is standing at the junction So one fellow turns the wrong way, he goes there, collects, he goes on. You know. What can you do? I mean, you have a family to look after and the pay scale is very little. I don't think India can revise the salary scale to such an extent that everybody is, you know, able to meet all the requirements. But some effort can be made. The disparity is growing wider and the arrogance that goes with it. One prominent Indian leader told me, the new high caste is the new rich man. It's no longer, at least in the old system, you have a caste system, but each caste had its responsibility, and the Brahmins, they have to show that they are, you know, superior in the acquisition of knowledge and several other things. That's why they are in that position. Kshatriyas, they want to defend the country. But now, it is on the basis of how much money you have in the bank. So, unless you tackle the social problems, I think it will take a long time. The pressure that people can bring upon the government to change, I think it takes its time. It won't happen in one generation, maybe more, you know. So, unless India is not a country of revolutions, I mean, you can have the French Revolution, you can have the double tent in China and so on, but India, it's not in character. So it has to evolve in its own way, and I think ultimately it will get there. But as what Mr. Rai mentioned, that he would not change his position for anything in the world because he enjoys it. As a person who has gone to invest in India, all the unease of doing business, in spite of all that, I would still say that India is a good place to invest. And at the end of the day, if you run a good operation, you get a reasonable return. I think my friend Girija Pandey is smiling, so I think he agrees with me. So I think on that note, let me thank the speaker. ISAS, we have this scheme where we bring in people who have served the government, served the private sector, whatever, for special for specific periods, and they spend about a year, 2 years, and so on a very easygoing sort of system. They spend most of the time in India, they come here, spend 2-3 weeks, and we gain a lot from that. Mr. Vinod Rai is one of them. Our next lecture will be by Dr. Subbarao, who was the former governor of the central bank. So he's with us. And we have others coming as well in the pipeline. There are quite a few. And our main objective is to make sure that South Asia gets fair exposure in Singapore. You are not guided by prejudices or hearsay, fake news, and so on. Because I remember once telling a Straits Times guy, when Bill Gates built the second center of excellence outside the United States in Hyderabad, Singapore newspapers did not cover it. But in Bihar, when a farmer married his son to a calf because he wanted rain, he said this is to give his son to the cow as a bridegroom. That was in the third page in the Straits Times. So we have in Singapore, with all its mistakes, we also get things wrong. But if you impassionately and objectively look at things, India, I've been there 20 years, I see the difference. There is a tremendous difference. But you still have the noise level far too high for any civilized person to access. And person who makes the loudest noise gets heard first, and he's not the most logical, but he may get his way. So the bullies may have to be sidelined when that has to be, the culture must go through a certain change. It will take time, but I think it will happen. So, Thank you very much. And thank you for being with us in ISAS.
Thank you, Mr. Rai and Ambassador Pillai. With that, we have come to the end of the second ISAS lecture. As Ambassador Pillai mentioned, we have lined up 2 more ISAS lectures in the next 2 months. On 28th February 2018, we will have Dr. Duveri Subbarao, Distinguished Visiting Research Fellow, ISAS NUS, and former Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, speaking on the topic of India in a globalizing world. Ambassador Shyam Saran, former Foreign Secretary India, will present on security and governance in India at the 4th ISAS lecture on 9th March 2018. We will send the details to you in due time. We look forward to seeing you at these lectures and future ISAS events. We have arranged the tea reception outside this function room. With that, from all of us at ISAS, thank you and have a great year ahead.